Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really cool essay that connects ancient philosophy with modern neuroscience to tackle one of the biggest questions we can ask. What exactly is consciousness? So let's kick things off with this powerful idea from Aldous Huxley. His theory was that our brain doesn't actually create consciousness. Instead, he saw it as a kind of filter, what he called a reducing valve. Its job? To protect us from this overwhelming cosmic reality he called mind at large. So the world we see, feel, and hear every day, that's just the measly trickle that makes it through the valve.
Okay, so how does this valve of his actually do its job? Well, the essay argues it works through three really specific filters that pretty much sculpt that trickle of reality we live in.
First up, you've got the needs system, which is always on, constantly scanning for anything that might be useful for our survival. Then there's the exclusion system, which is busy rejecting anything that seems like a threat. And the result of those two working together, that's the not seeing system. Basically, anything that's not useful and not a threat just becomes totally invisible to us. We don't even register it.
Okay, and this is where things get really interesting. It turns out this modern biological metaphor gives us a whole new way to understand a very ancient idea. You see, these three filters map almost perfectly onto the 2,500-year-old Buddhist concept of the three poisons: desire, aversion, and ignorance. It's like a translation project across millennia.
And this translation is so crucial. It reframes these ancient poisons. They're not some kind of moral failing you should feel guilty about. They're just the basic nuts and bolts programming of a brain that evolved to survive. It's not about sin. It's a biological filter. And just understanding that shift is a huge first step.
All right, let's fast forward to today, because modern science has been creating its own incredibly detailed map of that measly trickle of consciousness that Huxley was talking about.
One of the biggest players in this field is something called integrated information theory, or IIT. It was developed by a neuroscientist named Giulio Tononi, and it's this really ambitious attempt to nail down the essential ingredients for any conscious moment, period.
So IIT boils it down to 5 core properties or axioms that every single conscious moment has to have. Let's walk through them. First, it's intrinsic. You're the one having the experience, right? It's happening from your point of view. Second, it's composed. It's made of all sorts of things like sights, sounds, feelings. But third, it's also integrated. All those different parts feel like one single seamless experience. And finally, it's definitive. It's this specific feeling and not some other one. And it's bounded. It has edges. It's your experience and not mine. Altogether, these 5 points give us a really precise blueprint of our normal, everyday, filtered reality.
But here's the catch. For all its precision, this whole scientific approach slams into a huge wall, a problem that's captured perfectly in a metaphor from the author Michael Pollan.
As Pollan puts it, we're so completely surrounded by our own consciousness that we can't get outside of it to study it like some separate object. We're like a fish trying to get a good look at the water it's swimming in. It's everywhere.
And this just throws us into this crazy mind-bending loop, right? If the very tool you're using to investigate is the thing you're trying to investigate, well, how can you ever get an objective picture? It's a genuine puzzle. It's like trying to see your own eyelashes, or, trying to measure a ruler with itself. The observer is the observed.
And that, right there, is the wall that what we call third-person science hits. As one biologist puts it, if your whole idea of science is that it's this purely external, objective thing, then consciousness will always be out of reach. You just can't get there from here.
But what if we've been asking the wrong question all along? What if the problem isn't the water, but how the fish thinks about itself? This is the big pivot in the whole story.
So the essay puts 2 fish side by side. You've got Pollan's fish, who can't see the water because it's in it. But then there's another fish from the writings of a 13th century Buddhist monk named Nichiren. This fish doesn't need to get out of the water because it knows it's literally made of the water. See the difference? The problem isn't being immersed, it's the illusion that we're separate from our world in the first place.
And that insight points to a whole different way of doing science. A first-person science, like meditation or other contemplative practices, where you use consciousness to investigate itself directly, from the inside out.
Okay, so that sounds great in theory, but how does it actually work? How do you do this first-person science? Well, it comes down to finding a very specific point to intervene in your own moment-to-moment experience. Buddhist psychology has this incredible map. It's a 12-link chain that shows how suffering happens, like a chain reaction. It starts with ignorance and leads all the way to clinging and suffering. But right smack in the middle of that chain, there's this critical link, this hinge point. It's called Vedana, and it's just the raw feeling of an experience. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral before you've even had time to react.
This is the whole game, right here. That raw feeling happens before our automatic reaction, our craving, our aversion kicks in. There's a little gap. And contemplative practice is basically a technology for getting into that tiny space, for learning how to feel a feeling completely without being hijacked and driven by it. The goal here is to develop something called equanimity. And no, that doesn't mean you become some kind of robot who doesn't feel anything. It's the opposite, actually. It's about having a mind that's so stable and balanced that you can choose how to respond instead of just being a prisoner to your automatic reactions.
So if we look back, all that Western science stuff, Huxley's valve, IIT's axioms, it's not wrong. It's actually an amazing scaffold. It builds a framework that gets us right to the edge of the problem, using a language we can all understand.
But the real breakthrough from these contemplative traditions is realizing the goal was never to escape the water. In fact, that desperate feeling, that urge to climb out and get away, that is the filter in action. The fish never left the water. It was always home.
And that leaves us with this final, really powerful idea to chew on. What if consciousness isn't some puzzle out there that we need to solve? What if it's just a fundamental fact of our existence, a reality we're meant to inhabit, to practice, and to understand, right from the inside, right where we already are?